Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the virtual coffee chat series. I have Paul with me today as my guest, and I'm actually very excited about our chat today because they are two topics. We're going to talk about two topics mainly that are quite interesting to me, and I think they are quite relevant to everyone else out there these days as well. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself? Just a quick introduction, and then we can go into dissecting our topics.
Thanks, Olive. So my name is Paul Odnoletkov. I was born in the USSR. I've lived in Canada for the last 11 years in the Toronto area. I am a marketer, sales and marketing professional. The last 22, I just did a count a couple of days ago. 22 years I've spent, in sales and marketing. Most recently, I've been working with tech companies here in Toronto in a lot of different capacities, but helping them build their go-to-market strategies, decide, what the MarTech stack is going to look like, what personnel and other resources they need. And so I'm really excited to be here. I've been watching your series for a while, and it's really engaging. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Yeah, thanks for accepting my invitation. All right, so we decided to discuss two topics in detail today. And the first one actually is just very important. And it's also one of the things that I currently, like these days, I'm really looking to find new content about this as well. And I feel that there isn't enough content about this subject so far. So what we're going to talk about, how marketing's role is changing to support businesses and to support their customers in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. We could also talk about maybe the marketing trends that you're seeing, right now, and also maybe in the foreseeable future. I'd love to hear your take on this one.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a pretty hot topic for everyone right now. Some of the companies that I'm consulting, when the lockdown started, everybody of course got very nervous. There were different mixed reactions. I guess it's the 5 stages, and everybody kind of hit them at different ones.
Yeah.
Denial, anger, bargaining, all the
Yeah.
what have you. But I think ultimately what everybody realizes is it's changing. Everything's going to be different right now, from the social acceptance of not working from home anymore to inability to reach your customers where you thought they used to be, especially in B2B business. So uh, you know it affects really a lot of the marketing strategies that have been successful in play for years, if not decades. I think the two topics that you mentioned, they kind of blend in together in my mind.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. Marketing is obviously a multifaceted discipline, or a range of disciplines. But let's take, for instance, content marketing. It's been around since Benjamin Franklin's, a few centuries ago, right? And the one thing that we notice about content marketing right now, that if you go and analyze what's going on social media right now, in the first couple of months, everybody switched from a business content and educational content to this communal content regarding COVID-19 and how
Yeah.
to cope. We've seen posts on LinkedIn about how to help your kids, during the quarantine, how
Yeah.
to keep them entertained and kind of off your back while you're trying to work.
Exactly. The context has changed significantly.
Yes. Also, people were trying to share their personal stories, whether it's someone they knew or themselves, or just general information, like, what's going on with the pandemics in other countries and everything. We started looking outward to see, what it means for us, let's say in Canada and the United States, because we knew that China and Italy and many other countries were way ahead of us. So we started researching this information. And so everything that was rolling in decision making in business, in even non-consumerism, it kind of got pushed back a little bit. And I read an interesting article somewhere that it was by a psychologist, and that lady was explaining that our brain started thinking differently. We got less creative. We got
Mm-hmm.
it became almost impossible for us to do long-term planning to an extent. We felt drained in those two areas because the brain felt the threat, and it diverted all the resources that it
Yeah.
would naturally send to
That
those centers.
it's actually very interesting that you pointed the long-term plan, how we realized that were unable to do long-term planning, and that was maybe the first time that it really hit us, because we are used to doing long-term planning, especially if if you have like ambitious sales goals or just overall marketing strategies. It's always thought in long term, like midterm, short term, long term. You always have these types of um, plans that are going on, but we were shook by the reality that it can change, and something as big as a pandemic can all of a sudden hit the whole world. And it's not just another country that you don't work with, but it's also affecting you now. It's
Yeah. Yeah, it became very personal. It wasn't something detached anymore. And the interesting thing I think that comes out of this inability to plan long term is, like you said, if you're failing to plan, you're planning to fail. But what does it mean for companies that can no longer use traditional channels? So, content marketing, isn't what it used to be anymore, because people don't want to see your content right now. People want to see that your brand cares and supports the
yeah.
community and helps the frontline workers and helps its customers deal with COVID-19. And
Yeah,
so,
and that you're maybe coming
what do you
from a
do?
place of empathy and
Exactly.
prioritizing community over educational content.
Yeah, I bet there was some anti-globalists really happy about that somewhere. Just like, oh, now the social responsibility of a business comes into the forefront, so it makes more
Yeah,
sense. The other thing I think, everybody can Google this. I think it was HubSpot who shared that, and some other companies that shared that. I definitely shared it on my LinkedIn as
mhm,
well. Is there was a dramatic dip in Google AdWords. So
yeah,
companies that were relying on growth strategies for the lead generation on just traditional growth hacking, they no longer could do that because people stopped clicking on ads. People weren't even looking for the terms that you were bidding on. So
yeah,
that thing kind of went away. So what do you do about that? And then, of course, I think the biggest hit was in the field marketing area, because all the events got canceled, and we don't
exactly.
even know when they're going to be reopened.
Yeah.
Uh, to the best of my
Or
knowledge,
if like events and PR, like is it ever going to be back to where it used to be? I personally don't think so.
I read, I agree with you, and I think that's an interesting thing. I'll share with you later a link to, so that you can include it
Hmm.
in the description. But Music Canada did a research, and they basically asked people, when do you think you're going to go back to a concert? And it was staggering. 26%, that's 1 in 4 people, said probably never. They will probably never, ever, ever go
Yeah,
to a concert again. And that immediately made me thinking, okay, so what does that mean for conference industries?
exactly.
And by the way, this isn't just this is just the poll that they did after the first wave of COVID. We know that there's going to be the second and the third. At least that's what the scientists
Yeah,
predict. They say they ran the model and it's most likely coming back. So we're going to brace for that. Is the response of those people going to change? So a lot of my friends and colleagues who are in event business, they moved to online, and I attended one of the events not too long ago, which was, I think, just just amazing. It was a social media marketing all kinds of marketing
hmm,
conference for financial advisors. And it was interesting to see how in between speakers, everybody was on Zoom, everybody was remoting, dialing remotely.
hmm.
In between, they even had a stand-up comedians dialing in remotely, stuff that you normally see on stage at the conference. They had a couple of magicians. They were like doing all that. The lady was being
I
sawed in half
admire how
in the middle of her
quickly.
living room.
Wow. I
Yeah.
really admire how quickly companies have adjusted to this reality, and that they have all of a sudden, transitioned into virtual events. I mean, that's a whole new skill set. And one, like in one article, I think that probably on LinkedIn, I read that this is going to be a new skill that is going to be searched and is actually becoming a trending, like a job description now, virtual event planner, virtual event host, or something like that. So I don't know the
Yeah.
titles exactly, but this is going to be something new that's popping.
Titles are never a problem for marketing folk.
I
I
know,
think they
yeah.
come up with ninja, guru, growth hacker, whatever it's going to be. I think, I mean, this is a really good example, and I think that'd be one takeaway from our conversation here is, creativity and ability to move quickly in response to the circumstances is going to become a more important for marketers. Yes, creativity was always part of the marketing team. It was always implied that if you're in marketing you have to be creative, but it used to be more around imagery and
Exactly.
swag and then the semantics of your messaging, whatever it was never about, okay, now we're going to have a virtual event, which probably is going to be attended by more people than if it was a real event. And how do we make it compelling? So because it's so
Yeah.
much easier to disengage if you are
Exactly.
on
Like,
a
how do
Zoom
you
meeting.
track it? How do you track
Yeah,
the performance
exactly.
of that too? It's just, now that I'm, like thinking out loud as we speak, it's just like you would need a whole different marketing technology stack to manage it, plan it, and also measure the performance of your event too. It's so different than doing a physical one.
Yes, it's very different, and you cannot collect business cards or have people spin the wheel or whatever the kind of the most traditional ways were to engage them in a conversation. But at the same time too, is this really required, or is this steering us as marketers towards putting out a more important content? And the other thing I really like about these conferences, it's the virtual conferences, it's incredibly cheaper to produce. So if you
And
think
to
back in the day,
attend, right?
and
Yeah.
attend, yeah, but producing it as well. Like if you were to put together a conference, you already have everything you need. Everybody would send you their feeds or pre-recorded videos, however you want to position this, and then you just play that stuff. But all the content already exists. You don't need to invest in, like at the traditional conference you have to hire a
Mhm.
crew to
Yeah.
film the whole thing so that you can later use it as piece of content. Here it's already available right
Yeah.
by the medium that you're using. So that is another interesting trend that I'm seeing too, is everybody's moving to digital. um,
One thing that I like about this transition is that I think, and I also discussed this in the previous episode with another a friend, but I like that we're kind of eliminating the production and the glamour that we used to have and that we held up as a standard. Now it's just becoming more natural, more authentic, more relatable, in my opinion,
yes.
and also easy to produce and easy to repurpose into different formats. I like that as well. I mean, I can easily see an event being turned into an online course now.
Oh yeah. And I really like what you're saying about the realism of it, because I think this is the biggest takeaway for me from what's happening right now. And I'll support this with a couple examples. But I think authenticity of whether it's your personal brand or your company's brand, that's what becomes way more important than any type of content
Yeah.
that you can produce. And a couple of examples that I promised to give. Well, first of all, there are researchers online that basically
Hmm.
said that during COVID-19, people want to see that brands really care. They don't want to see that brands care about maintaining their business. They want to see that they care about community. And to me, that's authenticity. But the other thing, and that was pointed out by one of my colleagues, I
Hmm.
attend whenever we have Zoom meetings, I sit there and I live with a cat, and she's really, really curious. When she starts hearing there are other voices, she always comes to check it out. And when she sees there's nobody there, she kind of tends to get on my shoulders or on my chest and just like stay there for a bit. And so she became a part of a lot of my Zoom meetings. And one of my colleagues pointed out that, hey, I'm so used to tuning in and there's kids running in the
Yeah.
background or a baby crying, because we all live we calling from other homes, and now we glean into where everybody lives. I don't have any babies, but I have this cat, and people like pets, children, and everything, and they get to see my workspace where I work from and so on. So
It becomes more
it
personal.
makes more relatable. Yes, I become more of a person. I'm not that
Yeah.
marketing guy who just sits there at
Is
that
it,
desk over
isn't it
there.
very funny now to think about? You'll probably remember the CNN reporter. Was it the reporter? I'm not sure. The
Yeah,
news
yeah, yeah, yeah.
host where the kids enter his
On
room
Skype.
from
Yes,
behind.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. I
when he's on
remember.
Skype, and just thinking about that example, that didn't happen that long ago, and I don't know. It was
And it was a thing. It meant something. People was like, "Oh, look at that," and
yeah.
suddenly it's just like
And now
everybody.
it's the norm. Like nowadays my husband also works from home, and in the in the first couple of weeks he was a bit shy when my daughter was crying or yelling or just making sounds in the house, and he
Yeah.
would mute himself on on these calls. But nowadays I also hear baby sounds from other people that he's having calls with, and it's just becoming this norm. I mean, and it's not something to be shy of. It's also opening up new discussions between team members as well, and just making everything more personable and relatable.
Yeah, isn't it ironic that being apart actually brings us closer together
Yeah,
that way? So then people discuss about, whether it's appropriate to drink wine before lunch, at the beginning of
yeah.
Zoom meetings while everybody's zooming. It's like, hey, I really feel, and like, what's the deal? If you want to have a glass of wine, it's not like you're gonna drive somewhere, or it's not like you.
Exactly.
It's a lot of those things change. I think, um, you know the one thing you asked in the beginning of this conversation, what is the role of marketing and all this? And I'm sitting here thinking that, you know we used to kind of help sales guys just with pipelines or with content that they use. But I think, um, here's the problem: sales guys are becoming more like we used to be, like marketers used to be. And sales guys and girls, they still have the quotas, they still need to go and close deals. But now suddenly they have been taken, like all of the channels that they used to do have been taken away from them. They cannot
Yeah.
use content because nobody pays attention. Emails oversaturated. I mean, nobody paid
Yeah.
attention to email for a while
Emails and
now.
phone calls, and
Yeah.
because everything is just so sensitive these days, and there's always like a lot of things happening in the world that we need to pay attention to as businesses. I feel that if salespeople, and I did read this somewhere before as well, if salespeople would apply the same strategies that they used to do before this, they would also be taken as insensitive. um,
Oh, 100%. Tone deaf if they're
yeah,
not considering, if they're just trying to push their own agenda. So, yes, they have to be personable. They have, like, you're absolutely right. They have to be a little bit more like marketers and talk about and think about the semantics of what they're doing. But, also, there's account-based marketing, and this is an interesting thing. We
hmm,
used to help, if we're working with big whales, or we're working with big accounts where the size of a deal, or the size of, or just your go-to-market strategy doesn't even include demand generation. It's,
hmm.
I got 23 targets this year, I'm going to hit them all. So suddenly everybody's working from home, which means that your traditional, like sending items to their
True.
office, I'm not going to say gifts, I'm going to say
Hmm,
items, packages,
hmm, hmm.
or use something you used to do, just geo-targeting or targeting by IP, and to show them ads on social or anything. This suddenly stops working. So, other things are taken out of the equation, because you cannot go and ask, hey, I'm prospecting you, can you give me a home address? They're like, what?
Exactly.
That's gonna happen.
And
So,
also people don't want to touch stuff that come from different people these days, right? So
oh, I
that's
didn't even
also
think of, brilliant. I didn't even think
yeah,
about
I
that. I
mean, no
mean,
one wants to touch boxes these days.
yeah, people will definitely wipe them down a couple
Yeah.
times. Yes, that happens. Maybe a little less so, but I mean, it's still a factor. There's different levels of anxiety, and we
Yeah.
have no way of telling. So I think the only couple tools that are left in, you cannot call people if they're not in the office and you don't have their cell phone. If all you knew was their, that phone, they might not be able to pick it up. I don't know if they're routing it, not routing it. So salespeople, I think all over the world are just like, what do we do now? And there's only one channel that has seen the growth, uh, honestly, since the quarantine started.
Mm-hmm.
That's social media.
Yep.
But social media is also a very tricky beast. If there's some countries that where people, they did the survey, it was a long time ago, but they did, surveys a long time ago, and figured out that some people don't want to be harassed by brands on social media.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still this, LinkedIn and Twitter that are kind of business related. So if you're in B2B, that is your lifeline in many situations, because you can uh, be authentic when you're posting things. So you can post, share content about COVID-19 and how it affects your industry. So let's talk about insurance guys. They can talk about, like, hey, if you're going to a golf course, this is what you do. By the way, if you're, not commuting to work, you can lower, the premium that you pay on your car insurance. Financial advisors obviously can talk about, like, hey, this is what it means to, your investments, or the volatility of the market. They can alleviate some of the pains. And I think the things that they hit on here is that they still stay authentic. They still are not kind of harassing people because they're not pushing the
Yeah.
information on them. It's kind of, as a consumer, I still look at that information on my own terms, at my own time, and however else, wherever else I want to do that. So I think this is the shift that's happening. And if there was one advice that I would give to marketers, who are, scratching their heads right now about, like, what do I do, is I
Mm-hmm.
would say, start paying attention to social media, start building your brands and the personal brands of your salespeople. Focus on this. They will be the ones holding communications. We are not in charge of communications as marketers anymore, but salespeople, they've never been trained to do those
True.
communications. So I feel like we're becoming the enablers for salespeople to be successful. We need to teach them, pass that information on to them, and continue generating content, but in this slightly different
Yeah. Not
angle
through
of.
the brand voice, but through like their actual
Yeah, I think
individual
it's more
voice.
important. I think it's more important now to have individual personal brands, if you wish, than having promoting the corporate brand that we represent.
Absolutely agreed. I'm actually seeing a lot of content around this specific subject on LinkedIn from some thought leaders that I follow from the industry, and everyone is kind of focusing on, well, as a platform, they're focusing on LinkedIn, like LinkedIn lead generation, LinkedIn
Yeah,
connections. That is a major focus, especially for B2B, I feel, because that's my main like focus area.
yes, mine
But
too.
the other one is just the switch to focusing on personal brands and over brand voices. I really like that idea of marketers enabling and helping out sales teams to now use their own voices and to
Mhm.
create that content that they would not be so willing to do so. I experienced that it was difficult to motivate sales team members to post on social media or post on their LinkedIn accounts, whatever, because they did believe in their traditional methods of selling over social media. And they kind of wanted to leave that to the marketers.
Well, you're 100% right. There's two things, it's been hard to encourage sales to use social media, and now it's really hard to discourage sales from using social media the wrong way. And I'll give you a couple examples here. I got reached out by I think it was Edward Jones, one of the financial advisor
Hmm.
companies too. They reached out to me and said, it was a traditional pitch that you would typically receive in an email, but this time it was over, an email. It's like, hey, I'm helping,
Hmm.
individuals like yourself manage their wealth, and I'm sitting here like, do you think a high net worth individual would react to this? Like, this is bad. And so some of them are not educated, and we have to come to them as marketers and say, hey, instead of doing this thing, Mr. Edward Jones, representative, what you should do is start posting content that will help me identify with you as a person. And then when I think, oh, that guy's kind of the same as me, or
Yeah.
in some ways, then I can see you as an expert in your field, and I can look past those things as you're just pitching to me. So that's one way. And then there's the exact opposite way, is when people overshare, and it doesn't matter if it's personal or corporate
Mm-hmm.
branded content. Just this morning, by the way, I saw on LinkedIn, Peter Kazanji, he posted a link, and let me read on my phone. He said, I was wondering when it would happen, but I just heard about the first example of a sales leader who was fired for spending more time on LinkedIn thought leadership than sales execution. And there's 200 comments underneath it, and some of them are from sales leader who saying, no, it's a good thing. I think the key point to take away from here is, don't let that process become the process of itself, because I know
Yeah.
salespeople used to having had the activity, doing calls, sending emails, researching,
Mm-hmm.
sending emails, posting, and everything that they needed to whether they were farmers or hunters. But now a lot of that stuff is taken away, and they're trying to fill the void with more of that lead generation on LinkedIn, and that's dangerous. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who that person was who got fired. I would imagine that one of Peter's clients, so I don't think they they would ever disclose that information. But I think those things happen. I believe that this may have happened, and it's very dangerous. So that's where marketing comes in, is they can help pass on the hundreds of years of knowledge of how to nurture
Yeah.
someone, authentically, I guess, and teach the
Yeah.
salespeople to do that. And I'm not trying to say that salespeople don't know how to do that. They are the real relationship builders.
Yeah.
They just might not know how to do it with this new avenue, slew of tools and social media. They just need a little extra hand holding in the beginning, and then I
Yeah.
sincerely hope that they'll become very, very successful at that.
Agreed. I like that point. Thank you for sharing that. I think we're approaching the end of the session, but that was extremely helpful. I think there were just very valuable takeaways from the conversation, and I'm so glad that we covered this topic. Actually, it's very relevant to everyone these days.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Olif. I really am looking forward to seeing how the market develops. It's an exciting time that we live in. Everything is
Yeah.
pivoting, everything is changing, and I encourage all the marketers who are watching this, or to keep their hands on the pulse of times, and
Yeah.
note what's going on.
Yeah, that's very important I mean, it was always very important for marketers to stay on top of trends, but these days it's just become much, much more important to do
So
so.
amplified. Yeah.
Everything's happening so fast, so we need to always, stay up to date with everything these days.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much for joining
Thank you
me.
for having me.
I could definitely talk more and more, but
Maybe there's a second episode in here
yeah,
somewhere.
who knows? Thanks
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you for having
Have a
me.
great
Have
day.
a
Bye
good
bye.
one. Bye.